My name is Sarah from Lothian and welcome to Craftivism 101. Last week we looked at a couple of historic acts of creative resistance, and you can find the link to that video in the doobly-doo below. Today we're going to be looking at some contemporary works of craftivism from around the world. As I mentioned last week, the word craftivism was coined by Betsy Greer. As she researched more ways of using craft for activist purposes, she widened her concept of craftivism, that it is just as at home in the private domain as it is in the public. A few years ago, blogging on her website craftivism.com, she mused on the three shins of craftivism. Donation, giving to anyone but yourself, using your crafts to help others. Beautification, making your own public surroundings less banal, reminding others that your city is your own. And notification, teaching others about the causes you believe in, making pieces that speak out against injustice in its myriad of forms. If a craft project conforms to one or more of these points, then Betsy argues it can be a craftivist project. One of the earliest forms of acknowledged craftivism were knit-ins, where women would go to a protest and they would sit and knit and chat. This contrasted starkly with other protesters who could be chanting, shoving or shouting slogans. Marianna, a Melbourne craftivist interviewed for Anna Brownfield's 2010 documentary Making It Handmade, states, "Sometimes political activism can be very patriarchal, and it's about leaders and it's about being staunch and full of ideology and protesting, and it's all really boring. So when a bunch of women turn up and start knitting in front of a line of cops, it disarms the police and it disarms a lot of the protesters, because it breaks down all those traditional barriers of resistance." An example of this form of craftivism is the Knitting Nannas Against Gas from Grafton, New South Wales. On their site, their manifesto reads, "We peacefully and productively protest against the destruction of our land and water by exploration and mining of coal seam gas and other non-renewable energy sources. Knitting Nannas Against Gas, NAG, sit, knit, plot, have a yarn and a cuppa and bear witness to the war against the greedy, short-sighted corporations that are trying to rape our land and divide our communities. NAG's aims are to bring attention to the issues surrounding coal seam gas mining and exploration, to show our opposition just how far from radical the extremists who oppose coal seam gas are, to entertain and inform the public, and to bring new supporters to the anti-coal seam gas movement." Another form of early craftivism is yarn bombing or knit graffiti, in which crafters knit or crochet forms to install in the environment. We'll be looking more in depth at yarn bombing in a later episode, but for now we'll just touch upon it. Mandy Moore and Leanne Prain, in their book Yarn Bombing, The Art and Crochet of Knit Graffiti, document many reasons why crafters take their work to the streets, including everything from the whimsical wish to inject more humour into the streets, through crafters using their art to participate in the street art culture, people using it to escape the boredom of work or to liberate handcrafted works from their long-held associations with docile grandmas. Although mainly used as a beautification process, yarn bombing has also been used for political purposes. The Free Pussy Riot movement, in which people around the world protested the jailing of Russian feminist punk band Pussy Riot, utilised craft and yarn bombing in particular to spread their message. Pussy Riot was renowned for wearing hand-knitted, colourful balaclavas during their performances, and the movement adopted the colourful balaclava as the symbol for both the band and the movement itself. These colourful balaclavas appeared in a variety of both 2D and 3D forms, the most common being handmade and knitted either on statues, street furniture, or worn by protesters. One of the most iconic early craftivist works was Pink M24 Chaffee from 2006 by Danish artist Marianna Jorgensen. This work consisted of over 4,000 hand-knitted and crocheted pink squares from crafters in Denmark, in Europe, and in the USA. Jorgensen stitched these squares into a cosy to cover a Second World War tank in the centre of Copenhagen, as a collective protest against the Danish, British and American involvement in the war in Iraq. On her website, Jorgensen states, "The physical and personal acknowledgement in all these knitted patches are, when joined together, a powerful visualisation of thoughtfulness. The main impression of this knitted tank is that it consists of hundreds of patches knitted by many different people in different ways. Single-coloured, stripes with bows or hearts, loosely knitted, closely knitted, various knitted patterns. They represent a common acknowledgement of a resistance to the war in Iraq." As to the finished work, Jorgensen explains, when it is covered in pink, it becomes completely unarmed and it loses its authority. In her book The Culture of Knitting, Joanne Turnley writes about the project, saying, "The potential for knitting your opinion takes protest to a level beyond words, connoting home, care, closeness, and a need for time for reflection. This concept of community contributing pieces of their handmade work to add their voice to a cause can be said to have a precursor in the 9-mile-long Rainbow Dragon created at the Women's Peace Camp in 1983. The UK's anarchist ceramicist, renegade potter and craftivist, the Baroness Carrie von Reichardt, works in both the domestic and public sphere, creating ceramics, street art and murals in her trademark anarchist style. From her radical recontextualisation of vintage religious and royal crockery with cheeky slogans incorporating vintage graphic design, to giant street murals and tiled art cars, Carrie is pushing ceramics to the edge to protest about injustices around the world. The Tiki Love Truck was a work commissioned in 2007 by Walk the Plank for the first ever Manchester Art Car Parade. During construction, Carrie learnt that her friend John Joe Ash Armador, a prisoner who had been on death row for 12 years, was about to be executed. She decided to dedicate the Tiki Truck to his memory, and she and artistic collaborator Nick Reynolds travelled to Texas. They were witness to the execution, then, with full permission of the family, cast a death mask of Armador, which was taken back to the UK and placed front and centre on the Tiki Truck. 10 days later, the vehicle was awarded the Makeover Prize in the Art Car Parade for the most original or impressive applied decoration or feature. The Tiki Love Truck has been exhibited at various shows and exhibitions around the world since then, including the Victoria and Albert Museum's exhibition, Disobedient Objects. In 2015, Melbourne craftivist Tal Fitzpatrick asked the community to stitch messages to Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, starting with the phrase PM Plz on suiting swatches. Tal then sewed the swatches into a quilt with a central medallion of a portrait of Mr Turnbull and his dog to present to the Prime Minister. The quilt holds the voices of 121 Australians, all with heartfelt pleas to our leader. Tal writes on her website, "The idea behind this project was to find a creative and generous way to reach out to the new Prime Minister and communicate the issues and concerns of everyday citizens who wanted to reach out and have their voices heard by their new leader. In this way, the artwork is about democracy. It is about the right of citizens to voice their concerns and have the issues they feel passionately about acknowledged and addressed by their elected leaders." The quilt was in the Prime Minister's collection briefly, but now resides in the Australian Museum of Democracy in Canberra. And finally we come to the biggest work of craftivism in recent history, the Pink Pussy Hat Project. The Pink Pussy Hat Project launched on November 23, 2017 in anticipation of the Women's March on Washington, which was to be held on the 21st of January 2017. They had 3 months. Reacting to the then President-elect Donald Trump's recently revealed remark that as a celebrity he could do anything, he could grab women by the pussy if he wanted, activists Krista Sue and Jana Zweiman started the Pussy Hat Project. They encouraged people to knit or crochet pink pussy hat beanies to wear at the protest, to show a sea of pink solidarity for women everywhere. People held knitting circles in their homes, in public, in craft stores and libraries to knit as many as possible before the protest in January. Craft stores all around America ran out of pink wool. The Women's March spread around the world as 198 protests were organised in 84 other countries, including Antarctica. It's estimated that between 3.3 and 4.6 million people participated in the United States, and up to 5 million others did worldwide. However, the pink pussy hat symbol is derisive to some for 2 reasons. One, some people find the colour of the hats problematic. They equate the pink with skin colour and feel the pinkness excludes black and brown people. Other people feel that the term pussy is problematic as it excludes transgender people. Not all women have vaginas, and some men do. When interviewed for NBC News, co-founder of the movement Krista Sue, an Asian American woman, said, "I think pussy refers to the female anatomical part, but it's also a word that is used to shame people who are feminine, whether they are men, women or genderqueer. And I think what it comes down to is that femininity is really disrespected in our society." However, in that same article, transgender professor Cale Keegan, who teaches women, gender and sexuality studies at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, is also suspicious of the hat as a symbol. "We know that anytime feminism starts centering people based on anatomy, that gets kind of dangerous for trans people," Keegan said. We'll be looking more at problematic symbols and their uses in craftivism and activism in next week's episode. Craftivism is any use of craft that changes the world for the better, be that on an individual, local, national or international scale. It can be as local as knitting a slogan onto a jumper, or as international as contributing to a knitted petition calling for nuclear disarmament, such as the Wool Against Weapons project in the UK. It can be bringing joy to a single person finding a fake handcrafted cupcake in the streets, or people crafting handmade birds for bushfire affected communities such as Regional Arts Victoria Bird in the Bush campaign. Craftivism can change a moment, a day or a life for someone. It can get people talking and thinking about the issues. It can strengthen bonds in a community, and it can give people hope for the future. So join us next week on Craftivism 101 when the tutorial episodes start, and I'll be teaching you how to bend traditional crafting skills to your cause, whatever that may be. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to MonsterThinks, and share it with a creative activist you know. Tiki Love Truck, PM Plz, Pussy Hat, and done! What do you think the neighbours think?